Robbie and Landon Starbuck back to the show. Robbie was on the show earlier this week. He's now brought his lovely wife, Landon, with him. Good decision, Robbie. They have a new documentary out, The War on Children, available now on Rumble, My Movies Plus, and X. The War on Children is a documentary about the sexual exploitation, the human trafficking of children, but you don't need me to tell you what it's about. We got these guys to tell you what it's about. Robbie, The War on Children, I think it's been out for about 5, 6, 7 days or a week. What's it about, and give us a little history on.
Yeah, it's been out since Friday, and this movie really is a culmination of all of the work Landon and I have done together over the years to try to awaken people to this war that is being waged on our kids. And it goes from, the big tech companies to mega corporations, the government, nonprofits, NGOs, the list goes on, big pharma, but they all interconnect. And the problem is your average person, we see one negative story at a time. And so maybe 1 week it's this, 1 week it's that. We don't see how they all interconnect, how these people work together. And this documentary really puts the puzzle pieces together.
Is a part of what's going on with children.
Oh, absolutely.
Unpack that.
So let me give you an example. One of the primary ways that the media sells the idea of accepting that children are born in the wrong body and should have their bodies mutilated in a transgender, surgery or in this process is through the Trevor Project, okay? So they say the Trevor Project studies show that it would be healthier to let these kids transition. What they don't tell you is they're not studies at all. This was a quiz that was done online to a targeted audience. They looked for a group of kids that was the sample they wanted and rewarded them with gift cards and things like that, okay? Now, here's what's interesting. You know who one of the big funders is of the Trevor Project? AbbVie. AbbVie makes puberty blockers. Oh, but they're not actually approved to be puberty blockers. They prescribe these off-label. It's also a chemical castration drug they give to pedophiles. They're giving to kids as a puberty blocker. So AbbVie gives them the donation that then whitewashes the use of their drug as a puberty blocker. And when you put any pressure on AbbVie and ask AbbVie, hey, why don't you guys do safety studies on it as a puberty blocker since you guys know it's being prescribed in wide use by doctors to children off-label, AbbVie says, no, we don't want to. And the government doesn't make them do it. So they keep this cycle up, and that abuse of children continues. And if you go even further down this line of how it connects to ESG and the Corporate Equality Index, it connects to all these things that function as ways to push wokeness through business. So, at the end of the day, the way I see it is, it's child abuse for profit. And that's how they've made this function. And so you've got the nonprofit helping the big pharmaceutical company, and they all scratch each other's backs, and children are the victims.
Landon, when I hear that, and again, I didn't prepare you all for this, but when I hear that, I think about the abortion movement, because we always talk on this show about if your mindset doesn't realize that life starts at conception, you're really just a baby murderer, and because and so your mindset is rigged wrong. And so we shouldn't be surprised that these people would be very comfortable, the pro-abortion crowd be very comfortable experimenting, destroying babies, because they really don't believe in the sanctity of life.
You're absolutely right. That fundamental belief that if a child is inconvenient or unwanted, that they're expendable, is the same core belief that extends to child trafficking, child sexual exploitation, because if a child comes from poverty or a difficult circumstance, now if they're unwanted or inconvenient, they could be exploited by a predator. And so that's why so many of these vulnerable kids we're seeing exploited at higher rates than ever before. And that's what this film addresses, is what are those vulnerabilities and why are kids so easily exploited nowadays?
Robbie, I don't know how. Well, you're the expert. You worked out in Hollywood, worked with a lot of the top people. There's a conversation going on among conservatives and Christians and on social media. Like, this whole thing is like a pedophile cult ring has hijacked our government. Everything is attached to some type of child sacrifice, and everything we're doing is some power group that is all Jeff Epstein, Epstein Island. Do you buy that? Do you support?
There's no denying that we have a massive pedophilia problem, not just in the United States, but across the global elite and across the world. I mean, this is something that, I can't stress enough that it's not just there, though. This is a societal problem. We are not treating children like the innocent children that we should be treating them like. We're not raising them up with any sort of cohesive value set as a country. Okay, and that in itself is its own problem. But in terms of like Hollywood, DC, all those places, you can't deny the abuse of kids. It's out in the open for everybody to see. So when you look at how Hollywood, for instance, just sort of glossed over the abuse of children for decades and decades and decades, until it became a moment in the Me Too movement where they sort of they injected a little bit of it into that. They still never addressed head-on the problem of child exploitation in their industry. They never addressed it. They know it exists. They know it's a problem. Every child star we remember from when we were younger now comes out and says how they were sexually abused or mistreated or had drugs plied on them, ended up abused by somebody on set. There was functionally very little to protect them on set. We used to have a rule actually on my sets that I hadn't seen anybody else have, and that was that we would never have a child on set unless they had their parent with them. It was not good enough to have just the teacher that is required by the rules that we had. They had to have a parent with them. We did not want any kids ever in a situation where a teacher they don't know may put them in an uncomfortable position or where somebody on set could do the same thing. And so, we have to operate with a set of values as a country that looks out for our kids. And that's what we're trying to show people through this movie is I think we're guilty as a society, if I go back to your question, of sometimes making all of this infotainment, where you see some people, they'll focus in and they'll say, Hollywood's run by pedophile elite, and that's the whole thing. And it's like, let's get clicks, outrage, Hollywood's sick. Okay, what did we accomplish? We accomplished nothing. What are we gonna do to change things for our kids? And our film tries to drive home at that point of we all have action items. We all have things we can do. And my wife's nonprofit, freedomforever.us, right now, if you go put in an email, we send a free parenting manual. It's called The Parenting Revolution. And it has a list of action items for you to protect your kids. The things we don't know as parents. We did a teen focus group in the film. We did multiple of them. And the teenagers had no idea what the other group said. What they said about social media and the internet, I might as well have had them all in the same room because they all said the same things to us about how dangerous it is and how kids just know more than their parents. And they showed us how they do certain things that their parents have no clue that they can do, where their parent thinks they have no social media in some cases. And they show us how you use focus mode to flop from one screen to another. So you have a phone your parents see and a phone that you see. And your parents have no clue, okay? It's not even like they used to use the secret apps. They don't even do that anymore. You have two different phones functionally on your phone. And the tools have been given to you by big tech. Your parents are just clueless about it. And so these are the things we can affect change on. Here in Tennessee, my wife and I have been pushing for the death penalty for child rapists. This is something that too many conservatives have been afraid to push because they say, oh, well, there's Supreme Court precedent on this. You can't give them the death penalty. Well, you can. Precedent, you can challenge it. Guess what? Democrats do it all the time. It's a bad precedent. The case law on it is terrible, and it will be overturned at Supreme Court. So we have that now here in Tennessee on the precipice of passing where child rapists will have to be afraid again of the ultimate punishment if they rape children in the state of Tennessee. Those are the things we can be doing is become activists for kids to protect them instead of just being outraged by these people. And the more we do that other stuff and set these lines in society, the less room evil people have to operate.
When you look back, because I do, I'm 56, you guys are in your 30s, but when you look back at Hollywood, and again, you're still young, do you look back and go, man, I was really naive. There were so many things going on that I was so naive that I was blinded towards. Do you have that same experience?
Yeah, so she was a Billboard charting artist too, so she saw a lot of this stuff from the record industry side, and it's just as bad, if not worse, than Hollywood. And it's I definitely see the things I was naive to, because, for instance, now with the full knowledge I have, I'll give you a sort of an interesting anecdote. Let's look at something like Old Town Road. You know that song by Lil Nas?
Little Nasty X, yeah.
Okay, so when that song came out, It became the most popular song in the country. He became the most subscribed to artist on YouTube, okay? He went from that directly to sending children who subscribed to his account, because they played that on YouTube Kids, okay? So he's the most subscribed to account by people under the age of 18 for an artist, okay? Male artist in the world, not just America. The next thing they get is an alert for his Montero video a couple years later, okay? Which is him gyrating on Satan, simulating sex with Satan, going down into hell with Satan, like this whole disgusting, horrific thing. I think when I was younger, I didn't understand that labels were targeting kids. I thought there's some bad parents out there who don't set the lines they should. It's up to parents to do this. But when you have predators actively targeting your kids, it's hard. You have to be like an eagle every day, and parents, we need to be, we should be, but we also should be trying as a society to do things for the kids who don't have anybody looking out for them. And that's one of those lines that should be a no-brainer. A video of simulating sex should not be allowed to be sent out to a bunch of little kids on their phones and devices.
I've always said that the entertainment industry is the marketing arm for the sexual exploitation industry, because they have been the ones to groom us as a society into accepting child exploitation. The film Cuties, we see kids in films all the time. Most recently, the one that Obama's funded, the apocalyptic, end of world
the Netflix
film.
One, yep.
Leave the world behind.
Yeah, so I watched it just for research purposes, right? And there was a scene of a minor masturbating, and nobody, not one person mentioned this. And that speaks to the fact that society doesn't see that as wrong or problematic, that we are just showing that in a film. Obviously, it wasn't, they didn't show his genitalia, but the fact that they seduce us into these ideas as accepting them, swipe left, no big deal, and they are a big deal. And it's precisely why we don't recognize signs of grooming, signs of children in trouble, because we just see, oh, they're just at a drag show. Oh, they're just dancing. They're in dance class. These behaviors become mainstream, these sexual behaviors.
You just reminded me of a Matthew McConaughey movie from the early 2010, 2011. And because I don't watch any movie pretty much that's been made in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Because I just think it's, but as I start watching older movies, now that my eyes have been opened, I was like, man, even the older movies.
Yes.
And so, I don't know if you guys have ever seen the movie Killer Joe.
No.
Matthew McConaughey, and it's about, he's some kind of sheriff that's investigating something, but he has this flirtation with a 15-year-old girl. And I can remember I got a third of the way through the movie, and they had been just hinting around about this, but then they got into a scene where Matthew McConaughey's standing in front of her, and she's stripping down naked, and I just hit stop and just went away, and I was like, oh my God, this is a Matthew McConaughey movie, this is killer. We did this? People are, how did this happen? And why aren't there rules and regulations to stop this? How did we get here?
We lost our moral clarity and our faith as a country. That's another thing that we make sure to underline in the film, is that, even if you are a faithless person, okay, if you're an atheist out there, you need to look at the facts and reality of the situation. If you consider yourself analytical, well, look at the state of our country. Look at the state of our children. They've never been more depressed. They've never had more problems in their lives, okay? Despite all of the ways their lives have been improved, I mean, you look at the way that we live in society. You've got air conditioning. You've got everything you could want to be safe. Okay, it's literally at the tip of your fingers. But they're just in a terrible state. And what does that align with? The worst faithlessness problem that we have ever had. Kids report being faithless and not believing in God at higher rates than they ever have in American history, and it intersects with that. It's not an accident. It's not an accident that those things intersect. So even if you were an atheist and you just said, I don't believe in God, you should be desiring, if you believe in sanity, that people start believing in God again. Because just based on the premise alone of the fact that society tears apart at the seams when people don't have faith, that by itself should be enough to convince you that it's just a good thing if you look at it in that perspective, So I think if we get back to the reality that we need moral clarity as a country, we need a set of lines that we all can agree on. I think the place it gets hairy is with adults, right? We had this conversation last night on a Twitter Spaces, and it was essentially, where do you draw the line? And I think it just needs to be kids, because once you get into policing what adults decide they want to do, it gets hairy really fast with free speech and things like that. But with kids, it should be very easy. No sexual abuse of children, no intimating sexual abuse of children. None of this is allowed. All of this craziness needs to be dealt with the swiftest action and the harshest consequences.
I think I'm to the point, because I like to watch movies, and virtually every sex scene in a movie serves no purpose.
Yep.
It doesn't drive the narrative. It's completely unnecessary. And now, because my eyes are open, I'm just like, is this the director just wanting to shoot a bunch of video of these two people and he can go watch it at home? Because I would imagine in a movie, they may show you a 60, 90-second sex scene, but maybe they shot 30
They shoot
minutes
a lot more
worth
than
of,
that.
yeah.
No, they shoot a lot more than that, and I think it's actually it's a little bit more complicated. I think there's definitely sick directors like that, especially of children's shows. There's some weird stuff out there. I mean, look into the past of Nickelodeon. There's a lot of weird stuff there. But when you look at why they do this, it's because society, by and large, has been trained to want to buy movies that have sex in them. They want the forbidden fruit. And it's because they've been trained up by a media and a culture to believe that forbidden fruit is desirable. The wrong things have been taught. We've totally mixed up, our children who then grow up to be adults in terms of what should you want? Because if you put up an ad right now and you say, give me, who's top A-list star?
Tom Cruise, Denzel
You
Washington.
say Tom Cruise is going to be naked for the first time ever in this film, okay? You're going to have a whole host of women who go see the film just for that, because they've been trained up to desire something that they consider like a forbidden fruit, okay? And they've also been trained that Tom Cruise is desirable. Same thing vice versa with men. We've been trained to believe that certain things are desirable that should not be. And so when, men are proposed the idea of hey, you're going to see this woman who's super famous naked for the first time ever, and she's going to do all these things that you can fantasize about. It's almost like societal permission of oh, everybody's going to be doing that. I should be able to do that. And that's wrong.
Because I got 20 years on you guys, I can remember being, and I don't know what year Fatal Attraction came out, but when Sharon Stone uncrossed her legs, I can remember that was a big deal. And that's all we talked about at school or wherever I was at that time. Fatal Attraction, Sharon Stone. And everybody, and that was part of programming us and raising that expectation. But Robbie, one thing that excites me about what you're doing and your involvement is just you're so skilled and have so much experience. You're able to put out a documentary perhaps at a higher level than what we have been normally getting from the conservative side. What is a Woman, I thought was put out at a really high level, and I would imagine War on Children is put out at that same level, if not better.
Yeah, I mean, I would say in terms of quality, it's probably the highest quality documentary we've had on our side, and it was very important to me that we do that, because you fight this culture war with art that is good. Because at the end of the day, there are people out there who they don't want to watch something, could have the best information in the world, but if it's in a package that is repulsive to them or boring to them, it doesn't matter how good your information is. You have to understand the art of storytelling and how you get this across with beautiful aspirational images, and at the same time, have that discernment to know they need to be shown the other stuff. They need to be shown the reality of what our kids are being put through. And it's why I've told people this documentary is not to watch with your kids, okay? This is for the parents. This is for the parents and grandparents out there to understand what is going on, how to fight it, how to stop it. And so that you finally have a tool to be able to wake up those people in your life who don't think it's happening. Because we all know those people like that. I had this great conversation with Rand Paul's wife, where I asked Kelly about, sort of the area they live in DC when they're there for a lot of stuff. And she says, there's all these people who they don't believe this is happening. They don't think that there's porn in schools. They don't think that there's drag queens doing these inappropriate things to kids. They're just disconnected from everything entirely. And so none of it's in one place for us to explain it all to them. And she couldn't wait for the documentary because of that. She wanted to be able to gift it to those people so they could understand this war on children exists. I'm not crazy. This stuff is happening. We found all these books that we showed in the documentary in public schools, and we're proving to people that the media is lying to them. We did a very important thing of juxtaposing what the mainstream media says with reality. So you could go through quick cuts of MSNBC, CNN, NBC, ABC, saying that nobody has done surgeries on children. And then we hard cut from those scenes that have been just pushed into the American psyche to somebody who had their breasts taken off at age 13 in a double mastectomy, when they never looked into her mental health issues. They put her on blockers when she was 12, a 12-year-old, okay? And when somebody has to see those juxtaposed together, the moral clarity is very clear all of a sudden. All these people are liars over here, and you've got a child over here, a damaged child that's been abused by a system that is not being held accountable. And when you put it all together in one cohesive narrative, I think people understand it's time for us to stand up as adults. Be the adults in the room. Do the hard things. Be courageous.
And so when we talk about the adults standing up and doing the right thing, it's great that you're doing it. You're talented. You've made really good money out in Hollywood. But are the billionaires, are there any Bill Ackmans that are like, he's taking on Harvard and the Ivy League? Are there any people really significant means supporting your work and this type of work so we can get the higher quality documentaries?
That is a very interesting question. Elon Musk has been very, very good to us in sharing the documentary. I think it has 30 million views in the last 48 hours now on his account. I think that we're going to see people like him step up in this to be supporters. He's been a supporter. So I think that there are people out there. I think that we have less on our side than they have on theirs. We'll put it that way, because you don't amass that type of wealth easily. In Elon's case, he truly is a visionary of all the companies he's got. But in a lot of these other cases, there's a lot of really dark underbellies of how they get to that net worth, And so there's a reason they're aligned with the left on wokeness. There's very few who are pulling themselves away from it. I do think the ones like Elon that are recognizing wokeness as a problem, that it's a disease that is going to cause serious, serious harm to humanity, they're prepared at this point to step up in certain ways. So I think not just on an art level, but on every level, from academia, corporations, everything, I think you're going to see more and more people like that stand up and try to do things, or even silently in the background try to do things.
I want to play the official trailer. I want to give the audience a taste of this, and we'll play some clips from, I think Riley Gaines is in the movie, Rand Paul is, but let's play the official trailer so we can get the audience more caught up.
Are they intentionally sexualizing our children and stealing their innocence?
I think that's right.
TikTok specifically is designed to target young people. That's who their audience is.
Have children died because of social media?
Absolutely.
Have they been trafficked off of social media?
100%.
Have they been sexually exploited off of social media?
Ongoing, yes.
I'm scrolling on TikTok. I see little kids with TikTok. What are they looking at?
This is what you don't want kids to see, is that correct?
Exactly.
And again, this is depicting children. This is supposed to be kids.
Well, honestly, I didn't even know that transition from female to male was an option until I was on social media and began being exposed to those type of communities.
You've never seen an 18-month-old masturbating?
No, I haven't. Have you seen any sexually explicit drag shows marketed as all ages for kids that you would denounce or think that are a problem and that you want to distance yourself from?
No.
You know this is wrong.
So, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to end the interview.
They use the word sexualize kids at a young age, or, really young, right?
It just seems like there's no moral, construct at all.
Are kids facing just the absolute worst onslaught of grooming that we've ever seen?
Yes, the entertainment industry is sexualizing children for an agenda.
Your daughter was secretly transitioned at school.
This policy has to do with children as young as 5 all the way through high school.
Penthouse footed the bill to lobby before state boards of education. Yes, Penthouse and Playboy. The history behind this is far darker than most Americans understand.
think the big tech companies at this point are essentially aiding and abetting human traffickers and people who are working to exploit children.
Absolutely.
If you don't want to hear it in a school board meeting, why should children be able to check it out of the school system?
There is misinformation presented that somehow that we're doing surgery on minors or even children, and that simply is not true.
How old were you when they gave you a double mastectomy?
It was a month after my 13th birthday.
Ultimately, we're going to talk about, are they going to give, the counselor's going to give them medication there at school without their parents' permission? I mean, I think we're leading towards an absurd and horrific time.
First of all, we weren't forewarned we would be sharing a locker room. We had no idea. I turned around, a 6'4", 22-year-old man, fully intact with an exposing male genitalia.
This ideology is killing our kid.
Do you think more people need to speak up to protect kids like your daughter?
Yes, I do.
Well, I think from heaven she can see how hard you fought for her.
Do you feel like this is a war on children?
I know it's a war on children, but like they said, we're coming for your kids.
Yeah.
And they have.
Can I ask the cameras to get turned off for just a second? I just want to have a real conversation.
So, your
spoiler: the cameras did not get turned off.
So, your final question there, is this a war on children, makes me go to, I think it's a war on 3 different levels, but I'm trying to figure out, I want you to explain, what's the ranking? Is this a global war on children? Is this a war directed at Western civilization? Is this a war directed at America and to bring down our young people? It's probably an attack on all 3 levels, but what's the highest priority here? America, Western civilization, or this global agenda?
You know, to be honest with you, I think that they all intersect, and I think it's all happening at once, and it's sort of a chaos strategy. That's how Layman's talked about it, is it's a chaos strategy. The more chaos, the better chance they have of succeeding at bringing everything down. You know, if you look back at communist revolutions across all of human history, okay, they all have something in common. They never happen to a happy country. They happen during chaos, manufactured chaos. And so if you can manufacture that chaos on a global scale in any way, you can bring through revolution, whether it be communism, whether it be a radical ideology, it doesn't matter what it is. If you can create that chaos, manufacture it, create an enemy, and create a savior, you can do anything.
That sounds like Revelations and, one world government and the Antichrist.
That's the track that this ideology leads toward, is a one world government, which I can't think of anything more dangerous. There should never be that type of control over humanity. I mean, really, you said, actually just this morning, this is really a war on humanity, on God's creation. That's what this is. It's a war on all of it. They go after kids because they're the most vulnerable. And it's also about the future. They understand that maybe right this second, you're as a society not willing to accept the legalization of pedophilia. They understand, though, that if they can get the kids to believe pedophilia is okay, that when they're adults, maybe they'll look the other way. Maybe they'll feel like they need daddy government so much to survive that they're willing to let the government do anything. And so if that's the case, they're willing to wait 20 years for the kids to bring forth that future, as long as they're able to indoctrinate them now while the parents are on the sidelines.
It's so, the attack on family, and they pretend like they don't understand the ramifications, but there's so many ramifications. And I'm 56, so I can remember when my parents divorced, me, my brother, and mother, we moved to an apartment in the ghetto, and there's a lot of single mothers. And so there's a lot less parental supervision. And so sexual stupidity is it's unsupervised. And kids are going to do stupid things when there's no supervision. And so you destroy the family and create all these single parent households. That opens doors for uncles, grandfathers, next door neighbors, whoever's supervising your kid rather than mommy and daddy to sexually exploit those kids. And so when my mother, our apartment got broken into, when me and my brother were all staying with my dad and my step family, my mother didn't tell us that, but it got broken into, she was home, and then she moved us, she took a second job and moved us to a working class suburb where there were more families and intact families. And so I'm in a different environment and culture. And I can remember, I moved there when I was in 3rd grade. And I had to be reprogrammed. I've talked about this on this show, because I brought a lot of that stupidity, sexual stupidity. We used to play a game called Hide Go Get It. We didn't play Hide Go Seek. We played Hide Go Get It. They didn't play that out in this new neighborhood, and I had to make adjustments and have my mind, and thank God for it. But that's when I just think about like how long-term their vision is, and it makes me like fearful, like, can we catch up? Can we fix this? It's just like same-sex marriage. You're men adopting babies, denying the baby a mother. This is crazy.
But there's a case recently, Shane Dawson, famous YouTuber, him and his partner have 2 kids in Colorado. Shane has made all types of comments that were totally fond of pedophilia, and he's allowed to have these kids in his care where he's admitted to sexually abusing an animal, okay? Like, this is any sane human being, if you sat them down and you said, hey, you're acting as a jury of his peers, is this man fit to have a child in his care? They'd say, absolutely not, he should be in a prison. It would take an absolute psychopath to say, yeah, put a kid in his care. The comments he's made are horrific. Like, I mean, some of the most horrific stuff you could possibly say. And as a country, we're saying, well, we'll look the other way. So to your point about, is it too late? It can't be. Because if it's too late, I mean, all bets are off. Everything is gonna get so dark from here that I don't think you want to imagine that. So you have to believe. You have to believe that we can catch up. You have to believe that we can stop them. And that takes faith. And again, we were talking, earlier this week, you did a show that asked the question of, essentially what your favorite sacrifice in the Bible was. And I would tell people, be like Saul, have blind faith. Be that man that's willing to drop everything in your life that you know and love, or woman, drop everything you know and love to do the right thing, to do what you feel called to do what you feel drawn to. And it doesn't matter what the cost of that is. In this context, to save our kids, save the generation, save our country, save the world, we all have to do something. We're all going to have to sacrifice something. Our ancestors died in fields, froze in wars. I mean, we couldn't even fathom the sacrifices our ancestors made, what our ancestors went through. We live cushy lives in comparison. And so it's our turn to sacrifice something. And that's where we're at.
And for a lot of men and women, I think one of the biggest sacrifices we all have to make is quit worrying about what the world says about us. And, I was at Charlie Kirk's TPUSA event out in Phoenix in, I think, December or November. And my whole speech was like, hey, men, and I was real with it. I was like, particularly you white guys, quit apologizing. America's history should not compel shame. It should compel gratitude. That's just a fact. I don't care what they say. So get off your knees and quit apologizing. They got you on the defensive like you got something to apologize for, and you just don't. And so if they want to call you every name in the book, they call me a coon, an Uncle Tom, a sellout, I'm a puppet for the white man. I'm good with all of it. Call me all those names. And I maybe it's a tiny bit more difficult for white guys, but I really don't, because there's things I grew up socializing with when I was much younger with just like black people that were Democrats or whatever that now it's like off limits for me to socialize in the things I grew up in because there's so much hostility because I'm standing on these Christian conservative values. And so I've had to sacrifice that. And it's easier when you're 56 because you don't like to do much at 56. You guys will find that out in 20 years.
Oh, I'm already there. I'm already there. I have the heart of an old man, so I'm already there.
But we got to sacrifice our reputations and know that, God is looking down and is the real judge of our character and our values. He knows our heart. And so circling, we talked earlier or in the week about Tucker Carlson and other people and yourself and Matt Walsh and you got Charlie Kirk. You guys are all racist, blah, blah. Nah, I'm just standing on this Bible. And
I got called an Uncle Tom recently, and I'm still trying to figure that out because I was like, I'm Latino, yes, I am Cuban, but the Uncle Tom thing, it doesn't quite make sense to me. I usually get more so they say gusano, which it's like basically in Spanish, like calling you like a worm. But what's funny is it's always like white liberals who call me it. And it's something that like the communists in colleges now, they think it's like some cute thing to say. It doesn't even make sense. I mean, all of the things like the coon thing and the Uncle Tom thing, like, none of it makes any like logical sense to me. Does it make any sense to you?
No.
Because I'm impervious to it. Like I usually laugh when I see them call me something. I'm like, what do they get out of it?
It's just a tool, again, to silence us. And because, look,
it doesn't work.
I know, public figures, though, live in fear of like, if my Twitter feed is filled up with people calling me a racist, my bosses will start to say, he's a racist, or, black people don't like him. And it's a way of running you out of corporate America, and that's why we have to be willing to build our own stuff.
Yeah,
and again,
you have a better audience because you don't do what they want you to do. You have a far better audience.
But also, I have a better work environment.
Yeah.
There's probably 5 or 6 Bibles in here.
First thing I noticed when I walked in.
There's signs up that reference Jesus and all this. I get to actually be myself. You go into some corporate setting with my values and you got to start hiding them. And people will say crazy things that you really disagree with, and you just got to sit there and, yeah. And just...
Will you explain, like, one of the greatest things we learned from leaving the entertainment industry about friends, like who your real friends are?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we were canceled before cancel culture was a thing and there was even a word for it. We were like, what is happening? Why are parents, canceling birthday parties with our kids who we've raised together and went to mommy and me classes to? Our daughter was targeted at school by a group of these ironically white liberal kids saying that she was a racist because her daddy believes in a wall and border immigration control. So it was what we went through as a family at the time was just awful. But I'm so grateful looking back now because it really was God revealing to us in our life that all of this that we built was just fake and was just going to float away because people who pretend to be your friend because you are there to represent something to them at that point, like convenience, you're there to play a role in their lives. The second you are who you are and you actually walk out your Christian faith, which is what we're supposed to do, we're supposed to be hated. If we're actually living as Christians, the world is not going to like us. The world is not going to be our friend. So when you actually walk that walk and you realize those people are not your friends, you start living, it's almost like it's true freedom, like to live more authentically and say, okay, these are not our friends. This environment is not where we want to raise our children. And so, that was one of the reasons that we came to Tennessee was for a better life for our kids. And it's been the best decision we've ever made.
Yeah, that is the thing on the other side of it. There are major rewards for actually living your faith. You just have to take that leap and even if you think, this is going to be terrible, take that leap and trust me, when you get to the other side, you'll be like, holy cow.
You'll be so thankful.
20 years ago.
You'll be so thankful to know who your real friends are too.
Oh yeah.
That's probably the most beautiful thing about that journey is finding out, this group of people are my real friends.
I think I want to play a clip from Rand Paul from the War on Children. Now, I want you, Rand Paul, a big supporter of you guys, and has had some very interesting things to say about the documentary. Let's play the SOT number 5. It's Rand Paul.
Some major Pentagon doctors recently came out and they said that they believed that children had the ability to decide which gender they are, that they could change back and forth, and they also were promoting transitioning children. We've also found that they are in fact transitioning children. how did this happen within our own military that we've got doctors who are transitioning the children of our service members?
I think it's awful, it's reprehensible, and they should be fired for doing this. I think it's a crime against humanity to do this kind of stuff. The thing about a child making the consent is, how do you make a consent to remove your sexual organs if you've never used them? I don't even know what this is. A 7-year-old barely knows the difference between a boy. They probably have a vague idea of the difference between boys and girls, but they really don't have yet any kind of comprehension of how boys and girls interact sexually. And it's like, oh, you're just going to give up on that? That's not informed consent. The parents might be able to make informed consent, but I probably wouldn't let the parents consent to that for children, because the child has to make the consent. They have to be old enough to know what they're giving up. They also aren't informing them basically of the urinary tract complications that go on and on and on.
It was Rand Paul one of the few politicians willing to go on camera with you guys, or did you get a lot of cooperation?
We had multiple. I mean, I wouldn't quite call some of them cooperative, because we did have, say the legislator in Colorado who goes by the name Breonna Titone, who's identifying as transgender. We did have an interview on the phone that was not very long, and that did not go wonderfully well. We were going to reach out to the first ever trans-identifying state representative in American history, but they're unavailable because they're currently charged on child pornography and attempted child rape charges. So they were not available to interview. So we tried with Breonna, didn't go great, but we also talked with William Lamberth, here, majority leader here in our state legislature in Tennessee, who has been a great friend and has helped us to, get rid of child mutilation here in Tennessee, get rid of these drag shows in Tennessee that were sexualized for children, and then also now this fight to send child rapists to the ultimate fate of the death penalty if a judge sees fit.
The other clip I want to play is Riley Gaines. And Landon, I want to get your response to the issues that female athletes are facing. Let's play Riley Gaines.
We were forced to swim against biological male Leah Thomas, who is formerly Will Thomas, who swam 3 years on the men's team at University of Pennsylvania. Of course, then transitioning to the women's category his senior year, to where he dominated the women. First of all, we weren't forewarned we would be sharing a locker room. We had no idea. We're in this locker room, I'm changing, I had my back turned, silent. I turn around, a 6'4", 22-year-old man disrobing, fully intact with an exposing male genitalia. The only time we became aware that this was the arrangement was when we had to see it with our own eyes. So any man would have had full access to that bathroom. Any coach, any parent, any pervert who wanted to would have had full reins to be in there, and bare minimum, we weren't even told about this. So they most certainly want to normalize this. They want to take away our rights to privacy.
So, not that you can speak for all women, Landon, but this seems like such a clear-cut issue. Men competing against women and girls in sports, men given access to locker rooms and bathrooms with women. You would think among women there would be 100% agreement, like, this is wrong. Why isn't there 100% agreement on that?
It's shocking that the feminists are nowhere to be found on this issue and are seemingly championing these men coming into the women's locker rooms, or even in some cases adult men around young girls. And the problem with when you give a mouse a cookie, they ask for a glass of milk, right? That old book. But if you seed ground on morality and you say it's okay, to partner with a lie and say, well, as long as they feel this way, then they have access to women's spaces, then you are partnering with a much bigger lie, which is that if they identify as a woman, they can now be in women's safe spaces, which means there are no more safe spaces for women. Women who are trafficked, women who are abused, those perpetrators or men who are predators can have access to those spaces. Little girls no longer have the right to privacy. They have to stand there and have the mental rape of having to see male genitalia, because now that's tolerance. So that's the problem where we make, when we see ground with these little lies, we are partnering with a much bigger lie that is very hard to get out of. And we will lose women's rights in America and our safe spaces if we continue to allow this to happen.
You use the word mental rape, and I don't think that's inflammatory or too far. Because the reality, as men, we know that women can be uncomfortable in an elevator with a man by themselves. They can be, and that can set off a little anxiety. Don't know. So if you can set off some anxiety just being in an elevator with a woman, where now men and women can be naked in the same bathroom, locker room facility. What type of anxiety does that set off in women? It is a form of mental rape. And again, as a man, the number one thing, the greatest compliment a woman could give you is, man, I feel protected and safe around you.
Yes.
Right.
That's the number one compliment a woman can give you. And that will make a woman fall in love with you. Even if you look like me. Trust me. It's like, oh no, I'm going to provide for you. You're going to feel safe. Blah, blah, blah. Right. It's the most powerful thing. And we're taking that away from women. Right. This is insanity.
Yeah, real men don't make women feel threatened. But men who put on a sexualized caricature of women with fake breasts and parade around like we're just pig in lipsticks and high heels, that is a threat to us because we know that person's not right in their mind. And what else are they willing to do? We are certainly not going to take the risk, as women that have, conservative biblical minds like I do and others are not going to subject our little girls to bathrooms where that's being tolerated. And it's even here in Tennessee. There's been cases that we've exposed in our state where men are now being allowed into women's locker rooms where there's families, there's little girls.
Man was just caught at the YMCA here in Nashville. He was in the locker room, the changing room with the women, and he was caught videotaping them, okay? Only reason he's allowed in the bathroom is because leftists have become tolerant of what should always not be tolerated. And this is perversion. I mean, there's no, Will Thomas is my size. If Landon and I stand up right now, you won't be able to fit us both in the picture. I'm 6'2", she's 5'2" maybe in her boots, okay? If I wanted to be a predator against women her size, they have a reason to be afraid. I'm much physically stronger. Will Thomas is an athlete. He's not only my size, but an athlete. There is no excuse and these women were not warned. Riley had no idea a guy was going to walk in that day, 6'2", 6'3", naked. And she's a Christian woman who's married. She doesn't want to see another guy's penis.
Can I share,
that is mental rape. It is a
form of rape. Thought that it just popped in my mind, but I think this is actually how a lot of women are feeling. And that's that, what scares me more than these men dressing up as women, sneaking into our locker rooms and these predators and all that, is the lack of strong men willing to protect us and intercede and stand up. That scares me more because I've been in situations where I've looked around. I was at Walgreens just a few weeks ago and I saw an altercation. And I looked around to see what men were going to stand up. And I'm there with my kids. I feel vulnerable. I am here with my little one. I'm looking around and things are getting heated. It can escalate. We all know things can happen very quickly. Look around and I see a man put his head down, take his cart, just continue on down the path. See the other man run to the back. The lack of masculinity, the lack of protection, strength, that's what makes women feel really deeply insecure, is the fact that there aren't those strong protectors. They're few and far between, and we need our men to rise up.
And for the record, for husbands, I wasn't there when this happened, but husbands, you have a role in those situations where your wife does feel that way and something does happen. I went back there by myself and I had a conversation with the people at Walgreens, the manager of the store, the guy who was involved in this altercation with another customer, and they got on the phone, they apologized to my wife because a grown man should have never put any customers, let alone women and children, in the position he put them in. Somebody could have been shot over ridiculous stupidity at a Walgreens. And they had no training scenario. They didn't have any idea what to do. And these are the men in the store. I'm like, you guys would let the women who work in your store get in the middle of a physical confrontation between two men? What is wrong with you guys? Who raised you? But you need to be able as a man to go and stand up for the women in your life in those situations, even if you're not there. And you have to be the strong one that is not going to put yourself in a position where your family does not have you either. You have to be reasonable, but you have to show other men how to be men. And that's what I did that day. I sat them down. I walked them through how to handle that situation if ever happens in the future, what they could have done differently to protect the women and children in their store. And at the end of the day, it ended on a good note. They called, they apologized, they really meant it, and they learned a lot, and they changed the way that they operate in that store.
But the mentality of this country and the mentality of the people, there's so much messaging of, and there's so much, they're being penalized. I'm thinking of Daniel Penny and in the subway in New York.
Yeah.
They're trying to send this guy to jail for acting like a man. He's a former Marine. He's been trained. He spots trouble. No, I think there was a woman involved who called him a hero and all this other stuff. They're trying to put him in jail. And so they're trying to send a message. And again, that's New York. We live here in Tennessee. Hopefully it would be different here. But we also live in Nashville. Nashville's kind of woke. And so, but we're man's primary role as it relates is protection. And for women and children to feel safe, and they're taking that away from us and having people second guess, like, should I step in here? Because I'll be framed as the bad guy. And so I sit here and think that there's a, I'm a pretty strong patriarch, and there are some women that would call me sexist. And they may call me, and maybe they're right, maybe I'm sexist. But they would also say, man, if some trouble jumps off, Jason will die to protect me. And that makes them tolerate me. It's like, well, at least the guy will die.
There's a dialogue around the Daniel Penny thing where I've seen people say, well, it makes you second guess if you should do the right thing. Here's the truth, though. What happened to him is the reason I don't go to blue states, because I am fully aware you cannot train out of me the way that I was born. It's too ingrained in my system at this age. I know if something happens, I'm not going to be able to be the person that goes, oh, I'm just going to let somebody be raped, or I'm just going to let somebody be abused. I'm going to let somebody be killed. It's not in me. It's like it's ingrained in some men to be protectors of the vulnerable people in your life, people who don't have anybody else protecting them. And so for men who have that ingrained in them, don't live in blue states. I mean, really, you can't afford to at this point. You really can't. Here in Tennessee, at least, we know it's a red state. And in Nashville, this is why I live just outside of Nashville, because I don't want to have a far left crazy mayor. But you've got to make those decisions, about where you're going to be so that you can truly be who you are without fearing that you're going to be ripped away from your family. Because Penny could be married, have 5 kids, I've had that same thing happen, and be ripped away from his family for just doing the right thing.
Guys, thank you so much for making. Did I leave anything out? Is there something?
No, I think we got it all. Yeah. I think we got it all. Go to thewaronchildren.com, rent the movie, and watch it there. We're endeavoring. I'm going to be straight up with people. You renting it is going toward us making more documentaries like that. And when we reach that threshold where we're like, okay, we hit it, we recouped, we're making the next one, we're going to make it free for the world. So, because more people need to see, 30 some odd million people have watched the trailer in the last 48 hours. We want to, eventually get to the point where we just put the whole thing out and have, 50 to 100 million people watch the whole thing, All
right, well, I'm going to watch it in full tonight. Thank you guys so much for making the time.